This episode of The Dig is brought to you by our listeners who support us at patreon.com and by Haymarket Books, which has loads of great left-wing titles, perfect for Dig listeners like you. One that you might like is Fake Work: How I Began to Suspect Capitalism as a Joke by Leclerc Laberge. The year is 1999, and the world is about to end. The only thing standing between corporate America and certain annihilation is a freshly employed 22-year-old and her 3-ring binder. In this genre-bending memoir, Laberge reflects on her stint at one of the most prestigious management consulting firms in the country and what it teaches us about the absurdity of work. As Melinda Cooper puts it, at once hilarious and deadly serious, Laberge's Chronicle of the Absurd tells us more about the logic of contemporary capitalism than any work of standard economic history or organization theory. Find Fake Work at haymarketbooks.org, where all hardcover books are 10% off every day. Welcome to The Dig, a podcast from Jacobin Magazine. My name is Daniel Denver, and I'm broadcasting from Providence, Rhode Island. What is going on with Chicago? It's a question that people on the American left have been asking a lot since Zohran won his spectacular upset in New York. That's because in 2023, Chicago Teachers Union leader Brandon Johnson won Chicago's mayoral election. It marked one of the most significant electoral victories for the American left. In particular, it was a crowning achievement for that city's militant labor and social movements. Those movements have grown powerfully over the past decade and a half as left-wing activists took over the CTU and took their members out on strike with widespread community support, setting off a new era of teacher union militancy across the country. At the same time, Chicago has been a thriving center of Black organizing against police violence and the organized abandonment of poor communities of color. The Johnson administration, however, has faced intense opposition from the real estate industry, organized Zionists, the Democratic establishment, and the charter school industry. And Johnson's approval ratings are much, much lower than we would hope, something that mainstream media reports on Zohran really love to mention. But while the Chicago Project has faced big defeats and confronts enormous challenges, it's also won many victories, and it has a vision to keep pushing it all forward. It's critical that we learn from Chicago right now. And so a month ago, I gathered 3 incredible Chicago leaders and organizers for a live show at the Lincoln Lodge. In these times, executive director and longtime organizer Alex Hahn, organizer Asha Ransby-Sporn, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor. 2 things that are mentioned in the interview that you might need some context on. First, if you hear someone refer to a snap curfew or something like that, what they're referring to is an ordinance passed by City Council and vetoed by Mayor Johnson that would have allowed police to suddenly declare that young people can't be in a particular place. Second, you will hear a reference to Pedro Martinez. He was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools and an opponent of Mayor Johnson and the CTU's agenda. Okay, before we get started, you know the deal. This podcast is overwhelmingly a listener-supported operation, and the place where listeners like you support us is at patreon.com/thedig. If you can't afford a monthly or annual contribution, don't stress it. We don't paywall anything because The Dig is a political education project, and we really want everyone to listen to everything we put out to give you the analysis you need in your work to transform the world. But that only works because those of you who can afford to contribute do so, and the place to do that, patreon.com/thedig. There's free books and swag too, depending upon how much you contribute and where you live. And our occasional newsletter is sent to the email inbox of every contributor. Please contribute now if you can afford to. That's patreon.com/The Dig. Also, tickets for our Dig 500th episode party, Friday, November 7th in Brooklyn at Littlefield. Tickets are now available. The party will be emceed by Brace and Liz from TrueAnon, and we'll have other guests to toast and roast the pod from the Dig's extended universe, to be announced later. Plus, live music, and I hear producer Alex Lewis has compiled an outtakes reel, so that should be interesting. So, there's a link to purchase tickets in the show notes, and tickets are absolutely free to Patreon supporters at $10 a month or more. If that's you, you should have gotten an email or check the Dig's Patreon site if you did not. Okay, here's Alex Hahn, Asha Ransby-Sporn, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor. Alex Hahn is executive director of In These Times, a magazine dedicated to informing and analyzing movements of the left since 1976. He spent over 20 years as a labor, community, and political organizer. Asha Ransby-Sporn is a Chicago-based organizer and writer and a columnist for In These Times. She was a co-founder of Black Youth Project 100, where she led the group's national organizing program and worked on racial, economic, and gender justice issues across the U.S., and has since led on a number of winning issue-based and political campaigns. Jeanette Taylor is Alderwoman for Chicago's 20th Ward, a longtime neighborhood and education organizer on the city's South Side, and a member of Democratic Socialists of America. Alex Hahn, Asha Ransby-Sporn, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, welcome to The Dig. And make sure to speak close-ish to the mic. I want to open this interview bluntly. There's a widespread sense on the left elsewhere in the country that things are not going as well as might be hoped with the Johnson administration. Most people outside Chicago that I've talked to have no clear sense of why, but I do know that comrades in New York City are now furiously researching the question now that Zohran is likely headed to Gracie Mansion. So to start out, what's your general assessment of what's going on and what's happened so far? Alex.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having us. That's a really big question, but it's obviously an important question in the moment. I kind of want to go backwards a little bit in time and put us in the context of how we started and where we are. Part of that is a little over 10 years ago, I, along with a set of other union leaders and community organizers, started an organization called United Working Families, which was intended to be an independent political organization that could contest for power. I want to remember that this was 2014. This was before Bernie Sanders' first campaign. This was before the rise of a new socialist politics and an ability to really think about power on a bigger scale. At that time, for a lot of us, we thought of the mayor's office in Chicago as the most power that we could imagine. But that has obviously transformed. We were also not political operatives, right? We were union leaders who had led large-scale strikes and organized tens of thousands of workers, community organizers who had led campaigns against privatization, had done sit-ins and hunger strikes and militant action, right? The orientation was not toward electoral politics as a solution. It was toward electoral politics as a tool. It's also important to think that, victory, these things are not linear, right? And a snapshot can't really tell the story of where we started, where we are, and where we're headed to. And so this kind of conversation can help us, I think, get some light onto that. We're a decade into this project, this kind of phase of the project, but I think of us as being maybe in the beginnings of the second phase. We don't have all of the power we need to transform things, but because of having a movement mayor in the mayor's office, because of having elected officials like Alderwoman Taylor here, and really dozens of others, both city council in the U.S. Congress and the state legislature, the Cook County Board, we have an ability to understand what power is, and that is what is going to help move us forward. So it is, and the assessment is we are pretty early on in a much bigger project of transformation, and that's kind of what we're seeing.
Alderwoman Asha?
Yeah, it's been a hard 2 years. We've learned a lot in Chicago, I think, about how power works. I think the left in Chicago has opened up a new set of contradictions. And at least for me, I know I have learned an enormous amount about how I feel like power works, how I feel like change happens, and opened up this whole other window into how I and the people around me think about what we need to do and what we need to build in order to enact the kind of transformation that we want to see. At the time that Alex talked about starting United Working Families, I was in leadership at Black Youth Project 100, leading organizing work around policing, Black youth-led organizing. And, we had a sense that we needed to challenge and get rid of some of the decision makers in our city, like Rahm Emanuel, Anita Alvarez, who are participating in things covering up police murder and all of that. But I was on this whole other kind of side of, movements that have evolved and shifted and come together in some ways, and really thinking about organizing from this very outsider lens of, being people very far away from where decisions that impacted our lives were being made and being the people who were kind of protesting. Outside of that, I wasn't thinking about party building or winning elections. I was just thinking about how do we get some of these people out of there and then see what happens and who we can make demands on. It turns out we protested Rahm Emanuel so hard we got the person we'd been protesting as the head of the police board as our mayor instead, Lori Lightfoot. We didn't like her very much either, and that made me reconsider maybe we could get behind a mayoral candidate eventually over time. So that's a little bit of my journey. But I think in the last 2 years, having, 2023 really was, 22 and 23 really was my entry point into committing to a left electoral project and seeing that as a part of the legacy of Black movement and organizing that I was a part of, and feeling we needed to align with the labor movement. We needed to align with these other forces and movements that were coming together in Chicago in this moment, not just to elect a mayor, but to think about how do we actually take responsibility for changing the city in a different direction from the things we had aligned ourselves as being on the same side as being against, which was police killings and corruption and privatization and school closures. It had been a decade of organizing that I saw it becoming really clear we were all on the same side against these things. And I think what it looks like to be on the same side for a different vision of the city and to know some people who are in positions of power responsible for changing that opens up a whole new set of questions about how do you actually do that. And so it's sharpened for me the question of party, and I don't mean that in the capital P or ballot line sense of the Democratic Party, but what is the aligned set of forces that are working together to try to take over the government and then use it to do something different. And I think that's it's still contested and open question for us. I think it has after 2023, the electoral wins, a lot of people were talking about co-governance. Yeah, we're all gonna co-govern. And it's no, some people have governing power and governing responsibility and other people don't. And I actually find the framework of inside outside much more helpful. It has sharpened things about power, about coalition, who you need in it to be powerful and stable, how hard or easy it is to be unified in coalition. There's been a lot of coalitional strain, and there have been a lot of wins, and then also a lot of wins that when you're thinking about the scale of the city and the number of decisions that people in power make all the time, sometimes our ways of identifying the campaign goals we have are not enough, even when we kind of check them all off. So I don't know, we'll get into all more of that, but those are some of that's what my experience has been and some of the new things that I have had a window into thinking about in the last 2 years that I think are interesting and important.
Yeah, Alderwoman.
Brandon is not the magical Negro that's going to fix what's been wrong for 400 years. And you honestly can't fuck up a system that's been fucked up for decades and fix it in 2 years either. And so we haven't given this Black man any grace, and that includes Alderwoman Taylor. I have not. Sorry. Now, y'all knew when I come here, I was just going to be honest. And so I hadn't, because it's some things that I'm like, you could do this, and it just doesn't work like that. And so it's going to take, it's not enough to get somebody who is to the left or who believes in the liberation of all people in office. We got to support them. We got to get into those. And probably his biggest downfall is some of the people who've been working at the city of Chicago for 20, 30 years. They don't believe in people. They're still running, while Rahm and Daley are nowhere to be found. They still run those same systems. And so it's going to take us a little longer to get some of that poison out of city council and out of government for us to kind of see the type of city we all want to live in and be a part of.
Alderwoman, you put it rather bluntly in 2023 when you said, quote, "We should not be on the fifth floor, and I'm speaking my whole heart. We were not ready because we haven't been in government long enough to know how government really runs." What have you all learned over the past couple years about how power functions in the city? And Alderwoman, do you still
Absolutely.
I
said what I said. I'm not changing what I said. You can see it. Look at some of the decisions we made. Why I agree with the decisions he made, I might not always agree on how he gets to them. And so he's doing the right thing, but who are you doing that with? Who are you having those conversations with? How are you bringing in the community to understand the things that we actually do in government? And that's what the reason why we wanted a progressive mayor or a mayor that comes from the left. And so I stick by what I said. I don't back down from what I said. We could have waited. And what I wanted us to do was, instead of going after the mayoral seat, I wanted us to go after the 26th seat, because that's where that is where the power is. 26 aldermen or 34. We could have went after either or. And so I still got to beef with them about it, because I told them it's always the black woman y'all want to listen to, but I digress.
Alex. Asha, go ahead, please.
Well, I want to hear what Alex was going to say, but I feel like it would be useful to hear you spell out, like, what are some of the consequences of having, like, 19 progressives in a 50-person city council and not that majority that you're talking about, like the example.
We passed stupid shit like the SNAP curfew. We already got a curfew. We already spent millions of dollars on violence prevention. We putting money in schools. We putting money in communities we've never put money in. And so that was dumb. And look at the vote. Look how it went. We keep doing stupid shit expecting different type of outcomes, and it's just not going to happen. And so what I wanted us to do was, we got to get in those departments, because those are the people who make really, really bad decisions. I meet with the Department of Planning on a monthly basis, because they will fuck up a development and people being able to purchase land and just, oh, Jesus Christ. I can't say how. And let me say something. The new lady who is there, Commissioner Boatwright, I adore her. She's from the 100. She's from the hood. She gets it. But she got so many people in that department who don't get it and who are dead set on not making sure we own the institutions in our community. They don't do all that they can to make that happen. And so I stand by what I said. I wish we would have went out to those 26 seats, because also you got people who just say no because he's a black man. Let's make clear what's happening in city council. These the same motherfuckers that sold the parking meters, and we wouldn't be in debt if they hadn't sold them. So you voted yes for the parking meters, but now you got a conscience. We can't do bonds. We can't never do shit when it's time for people who make under a certain amount. We got a class problem in this country, and we got a colorism problem in this country, because we think white is right. And that's no disrespect to my white counterparts in here, because I know some of y'all are real allies. We think brown is all right. There's some of that. But also, everybody is not in coalition with us. But everybody will use us and pretend they are. And so let's call this what it is. We're at a space where there's no hiding place for any of us. And so if you ain't voting, if you ain't part of the conversation, if you're not talking about accountability, your ass is just some of the problem is everything that's going on.
Alex, I take it you were on the opposite side of this debate with the alderwoman at the time, whether to run someone for mayor.
I have I will stand up for Alderwoman Taylor to say she has been saying that for a long time. She was saying that in 2021. She was saying it in 2022, and she's saying it today, and she's not wrong. I disagree with her, but I can hold two contradictory things in my head. One is that we are not ready, and one is that we have to take the chance when it comes. I also think, and some of what has been said really makes me think about the structures and the people. We had decades of administrations in the city of Chicago that were designed to prevent the people on this stage and the people who have been working together for a long time from accomplishing the changes that we've been trying to make. And I am not trying to sugarcoat. It has been a challenging couple of years, but I think about one city council, and I might get the specifics of the policies that were passed in one city council meeting wrong, but I'm thinking back to ending the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, to moving family leave, to moving all of these, childcare workers. We've had all of these things move that in and of themselves, under a ROM or a daily, would have required all of the strength of all of our organizations working for 9 months together to pass one of them. We stopped ShotSpotter. There's all of these different pieces that have come together. Have they come together in a perfect way? No. But I do think we've got to recognize the challenges that we face, but we've got to recognize the successes that have happened. But also, importantly, especially for a lot of us who have been organizing for a long time, those successes in and of themselves do not create political transformation. So we have to continue pushing forward and fighting much bigger as we move forward.
Ahead of Johnson taking office, advocates for all sorts of good causes in the city of Chicago put together an ambitious policy agenda. But my understanding is that it wasn't exactly a transition plan because there was little focus on what sort of politics would be required to get those policies done. How, in advance of Johnson taking office after his historic victory, did the left prepare for taking power? And given what you've learned from that experience, how should the left in New York City and beyond think about taking power moving forward?
Oh, Jesus, you keep asking shit. So, prepare for everything. We knew that dim-witted motherfucking dictator in D.C. was going to get in office, and we sat back and waited to see what he's going to do when we told everybody what he was going to do. And so we should have had a plan for our immigrant communities. We should have had a plan of what was going to happen on every level of government, but in schools and park districts. Like, ICE wouldn't be able to come in and do some of the shit that they doing. Less to do with CPD and more to be do about what our plan is. CPD has proved to us for years. And let me say this. The superintendent lives in my ward. We 4 blocks away from each other. We talk all the damn time. This is less to do with him, but remembering he works for a system that we forget that was created because they wanted their free slaves. So the system that we created to free slaves, we expect to protect us when the real slave masters after us. Yep, got it. We keep expecting shit from people that show us who they are and show us their hand every time. And so we had these great plans. The problem was the implementation didn't go as well because I don't think people realize, and I didn't realize it until you get to government, that it's somebody on the bottom. Then they got a bunch of secretaries. Then they got a bunch of secretaries. Then it's another set of secretaries. Then you got a deputy commissioner that's got a bunch of secretaries. And then you get to the commissioner. And so we haven't right-sized government, which is the biggest problem in Chicago. And let me say, we get people working. I get it. But everybody that's working don't need to be working. Some of these people been sitting here 20, 30 years and ain't done shit for nobody but type a computer, answer the phone and say no, or what they ain't gonna do or what they can't do. Why are you still here? I know some people that need this job who would actually do it well. They just don't. And so I think the plan was there. I think the question was, what we didn't count on was the implementation because we don't know how that system. And City Hall is an evil fucking building. The devil is there, I'm telling you. Go in that building. There is a different feel to that damn marble. Like every time I go there, I used to listen to church music. Now I listen to gangster rap because Jesus ain't gonna cut it for that fucking building. I'm just gonna keep it real. They are so upset with Brandon bringing in different folks. Remember, this was Daley and Roms. This was their game. These are all of their people. And so just because you change the top, cutting off the head, the body's still wiggling. They've been wiggling shit for 30, 40 years. It's time to cut them legs and arms off. It is enough. Shit, take out the heart. Shit, did they do heart transplants? Like, we got to do something different. And so I think he was right on to have those transition teams. I think the part that we failed on, and I failed, that's taken us a little longer, is to just learn those systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Asha.
Oh yeah, there's so much here that so many people I know who are really smart would argue with us a lot about. Yeah, I think the thing that you talked about like quote unquote right sizing government, which is like kind of uncomfortable language because it's like it's also the language of like the Musks and all of that. And I think you speak to something that I, as like a campaigner who has led a lot of outside work trying to generate support for some of the big, bold proposals that have been on the table in the last 2/10 years. Yeah, on some of our campaigns, like the biggest pushback we get to some of our big ideas about like investing in the public good, investing in communities, making the city work for us is like people just don't believe that the government will deliver. And I think in this time I have been confronted with like, how do we work together inside outside to actually change the not just like me be good at like convincing people that that's not true and we need like public good and resources, but how do we also have people on the inside with like the ability to make it more true, that we can build things, deliver things, and have like public goods, resources, systems, programs, clinics, whatever, schools, all of that like work well and deliver for people. And there are like some exceptions of like public institutions, like maybe like schools and libraries that I think people do value in a particular type of way. So I just wanted to say that. Yeah, the transition plan and process. I sat on the public safety transition committee along with some cops. That was fun.
It's called collaboration.
Well, okay.
Big tent.
Yes, big tent. So I think there is an always tension and like balance to try to strike of, yeah, if you want to make something a reality, to govern and have like the consent of people to do it, you need a big tent of different forces, not just your like tiny leftist minority. You know, we need like a set of forces that reflect a majority of people and then also that reflect institutions that have to participate in making things possible. And I think that's like an important reality to accept. And there's constant contestation of who belongs in that big tent, where we're willing to take up battles that will alienate, you know, powerful or opposition forces, and where we're willing to like actually deprioritize that fight to like have more collaboration and have a big tent. And I jokingly, because like, I don't know. I have a different vision in the world than most people who are police officers. Do I think in a transition plan for the mayor of the city of Chicago, there probably should be some people who know how the actual system of policing works in that process? Yeah, there do need to be. Now, I do think that process could have been better, and I think it involved so many people that they wanted to feel like had a seat at the table that it ended up being more about generating that feeling for a bunch of people than like developing a solid plan. Because like in the like 3-day-long retreats, like me and that cop didn't come to like a coherent strategy for public safety, but I like had a side group chat and a this and a that to like organize to get like some things I care about like in that document, but that didn't produce like a strategy, you know? And I think a strategy to deliver is different than like producing a kind of like laundry list document that might have like contradictory things in it. So I think that time could have been used better. I think my experience in the transition process wasn't like as sharp at being like, what are our big things that are going to deliver for a majority of people that we're going to like get a lot of people in and behind. So I don't know. That's like one thing for New York is how do you do that? And I think there's like some real differences in the coalition that elected Johnson and elected Mamdani. And I think, you know, there's strengths and weaknesses to both ways. I think the Johnson election involved big unions, big coalitions, a massive slate of cross-endorsed elected officials. It meant that you're on the hook for a lot of different people and stakeholders with like a lot of different interests in a way that from what I have seen, you know, the Mamdani campaign is like a little more nimble, and that has been meant that the platform and agenda is actually like, it is big and bold and it's kind of clear and coherent, and it's going to mean like organizing a whole institutional set of actors behind it might be hard in unique ways.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I do think the question of taking power is the real center of the question, right? How do we think about something like a transition plan as a political instrument? I think that in Chicago, there are lessons learned from prior experiments, largely in recent years in smaller cities, places like Jackson, Mississippi, places like St. Louis, like Pittsburgh, where you've had progressive coalitions that have some of the same elements. And I'm hopeful that in New York, I'm hopeful first that November goes well. I'm hopeful that we're in a position to be talking about transition, that there can be lessons learned from our experience in Chicago, and that we can continue to learn lessons from, hopefully, from success there. I also do think that Asha raised an important question about what's the context and what kind of brought us to this point. And it is important to recognize the differences in what that history and what those coalitions are. It doesn't mean that we're not aiming at the similar things, but we are starting from different bases of power. The context of these campaigns is very different. The structure of elections in Chicago and New York City is very different. So all of those lay something out. I will also say, and I've been struggling a little bit with how to say this, we're also really saddled with this kind of neoliberal brain. We have all lived in this system. So many of us have existed in nonprofit advocacy and service organizations, and our tendency, because we have been so far away from power for so long, is to say, we're going to put our laundry list. Here are the 20 things. And again, this is going to transform the city. Those 20 things can all be accomplished without creating any power and transformation, right? That's not to say that they aren't worthy goals, to raise wages, to, create space, to, have new protections for renters. All of these different things, they are important and they help people, but they don't inherently build power. And so I think we have learned what the difference is between doing the checklist, because in part, when you're out of power, it's easy to say, well, shit, we're going to do this checklist and then the revolution comes. What we're finding is that you have to be at every step of that way, recontextualizing what that power is and understanding that the next step is going to look very different from the previous step.
Alderwoman, you made a really good point about what we might call the deep state of municipal government. Personnel, processes, systems that are not designed to help a left-wing popular government accomplish its goals, but quite to the contrary. And it seems like in Chicago, a really important case study on that is schools, because, for so many reasons. One, because this process that really brings us to the Johnson administration, that brings you into office, is really the struggle of CTU that dates back, I think, 17 years to the formation of the Caucus of Rank and File Educators, which then takes over the CTU, which then leads CTU on strike. Parent and community organizers like yourself working in coalition with them. Johnson coming out of the CTU, he's mayor, he meets immediately stiff resistance from the school board in terms of and it's the CEO is the term, right here. This is the title. The CEO,
CFO, BO. They had so many goddamn titles for that person: superintendent, unsuperintendent, uneducated superintendent.
Fighting his efforts to get a new contract for CTU tooth and nail, to get rid of a neoliberal teacher evaluation system. So if you all could talk a little bit about how those sets of conflicts played out between the Johnson administration and the educational deep state, and how amidst all of that, the CTU, that massive popular organization that did so much to bring this all about, how in that context they navigated the position of being in this sort of situation of co-governance, or maybe that's not so helpful, but of co-governance after so many years of leading the popular left-wing opposition.
So one of the problems with the mayoral seat is you don't know who to trust. Let me say that. I'll just tell you, I've known Brandon for 15 years. I knew him when he had a hoodie slob on his sweater and he wore gym shoes. I knew him then. He was a person that would get on the bus with us and go down to Springfield and demand that legislators met with everyday parents. And what he would say to us is, they're no better than you. They put their pants leg on one leg at a time. And so that was one of the reasons why I was like, he could do this. But I told him to fire Pedro. Pedro didn't do shit in the last administration. He did nothing during COVID. He spent all that COVID money. Nobody knows what it went to. Black students didn't do any better. We had loads of families who didn't have laptops, who didn't have internet. And so how are they doing remote learning? But I think that he sold the mayor a bill of goods, and them bills was fake, as you see. And then when they got rid of him, y'all, it was them when he was leaving. They had, they bought it, and I'm venting for a little minute. They had a little meeting, was like, he was such a great, and I got up there and said, where the hell was I at when he was great? Because this the same motherfucker that mistreated our kids for all the years that he was there. So how was he great? This is the same person that has not been accountable to any of us. This is the same man that refused. Now, I wasn't the chair of the education committee in my first term. I was on the committee. And he refused to come talk to city council about what was going on there. And so y'all trusted him? So I'm looking at Brandon a little funny, like, that cousin you got that sometimes don't listen to what you say, but you got to slap them upside their head and let them see for themselves that they made a fuck up decision. That was Brandon at that time. And so this was what I say to y'all, I say to him. So don't be surprised. I am not, listen, I'm 50. I get to say what the hell I want to say. Well, I've been doing that, but I'm a tourist. That anybody understands that. But at either rate, this was him, I guess, trying to give opportunity to someone who sold him a bill of goods that he couldn't make good on. And let me say this. You can't go from being 70 million in the hole to $1 billion in the hole in 22 months. So stop that shit he got. We've always been in trouble, but we ain't broke though. They spent $80,000 on flowers down Michigan Avenue. Do the math. Those flowers pop up every year, don't they? We got a priority of what we spend money on. And so that's the same thing with Chicago Public Schools. Think about this. Schools that are past north of Cermak get all the resources, get most of the things they need. And the schools out south, them kids will figure it out. When you closed schools in 2015, you got rid of the other black parent that was in these children's lives. You killed the last stable institution we had in our community. And so you got to be very careful about who we put in these positions. And so he should have fired his ass on his day off. But there again, y'all don't listen to the black woman.
Yeah, Alex, just about this confrontation with the educational deep state, and also specifically how CTU operated in this new environment of not being in opposition, but having one of their own on the fifth floor.
I mean, I think that, again, this goes to the question of you can take snapshots that look very different from day to day. But I do think some of the proof is in the result. And I totally agree, Alderwoman Taylor. There are, I think about kind of like a metaphor of like total war. And in a lot of ways, that's the situation that the left and progressives who are in power find themselves in. And it's around every corner. And I don't think we had the imagination, and maybe we didn't listen to Jeanette and some others enough to say, there is not going to be a break. You don't get to take off on Sunday. It is at every moment, these people are going to be trying to undermine you. With every misstep is going to be taken advantage of. They have the resources to do this. And so I think there's a better and deeper understanding. Sometimes you have to experience that to understand it. I do think the challenges of what has happened in the public schools, we see now that we have Pedro Martinez I'm sorry for the children of Massachusetts, but he has moved on to a new job. CTU has gotten a historic contract. Along with historic contracts for school support workers, for SEIU 73, for others. And the leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union was reelected resoundingly a few months ago. So I do think we've got to look at the whole picture of the situation. It's very easy to look at any particular day and say, oh, things are looking very bad. But if we look at the arc of where things are moving, we are moving in a way to be able to continue building power and build those structures.
Asha.
Oh man, you just took me back to some really hard moments. I just to like transition a little bit. In my first like organizing training / many that I have now since led, you get taught how to power map, and it's like there's a decision maker, and you focus on that decision maker, you tune everything else out, and you just like go as hard as you can on that. And that's like, Yeah, if you don't understand all the ins and outs of like every element of government and how every, different stakeholder might be influencing this or that or relating to one another, it's helpful to get people really clear on like who can meet your demand and who can deliver the thing that your community needs and give you the concession that you want. And I think what has like become clear to me in this phase of things is like that's a really, really, really oversimplified way for us to power map, and we actually like need more nuanced ways of doing that. So even in this scenario, right, the mayor has some decision-making power over education. The city council has some decision-making over that.
The city council has no say-so over Chicago Public Schools. None. All we do is give them TIF dollars to fix things. We have I think Daley did that, where he took the power from the city council. So no, don't put that on us.
Power is given and taken away from people you think have decision-making power over things, even when they have titles like being chair of an education committee. Then you have the CEO of the school system that's over the bureaucracy, and that's not an elected position. And then you have the school board, which is its whole own separate entity that like previously was appointed by the mayor and now we have as elected, and the community wanted it to be elected, and the charter school people can also spend money to like elect their people on there. So you have like all of these different forces that are working together. And I think when you have your people in positions of power, you just like become so much more clear that there's like more than two camps in any one thing, and like figuring out how to like align the most forces behind like the best version of the thing is very complex. And I think the like teacher contract is one example of like, even when you're getting hit in the media on it every single day and it's like looking really bad and messy, like not letting up on what that big visionary like end goal is until you actually get that and align the set of forces that you need behind it, even if the process to get there is quite difficult and frankly like straining on a coalition that you might need to do other things. So I don't know. That's
yeah. I mean, Asha was getting into going from a place where the left had an outside strategy when Rahm Emanuel was in power. There was so much work that we were all watching all over the country that was happening here in terms of organizing against Emanuel, demonizing him effectively, polarizing against him. But everything seems like it gets a lot more complicated once you need to have not just an outside strategy, but an inside-outside strategy. How did you even think about beginning to adapt to that reality?
We just knew what we had gotten before was shitty. So right now I feel like the good, the bad, the ugly. Daley was ugly. Ron was bad. Lori was bad. Johnson is good. Johnson needs help. We're trying to change systems. So for me, it's like, would we been better off pushing from the outside? No. Let me not say this. In this moment, especially what's going on with DC, I'm glad who we got in power. I do. But you know how for me, it's like your favorite sitcom. Everything is going right. You know it's some shit about the dum-dum-dum. You hear the music. You know in a scary movie, somebody about to get killed. That's how I've been feeling in this moment. Like it was too much going right, like him getting in. You saw generationally, you saw Rainbow Coalition. It mirrored what Harold Washington did. It was an amazing thing to see all of these electives from different level of government, all of these organizations that never really got to talk to each other or worked on different issues, get together and say, we're gonna get somebody in office like this. But you knew it was just too fucking good to be true. Like, so now we got the county, we got the city, and we got the governor kind of all working together, kind of all being on the stage, and now DC is fucked up. So it's like my favorite Stevie Wonder song is called Rocket of Love. And he says, you took me right in your rocket, you gave me a spark, and halfway to heaven, you dropped my ass. So we got dropped because of what happened at the DC level. But it's because we was organized the wrong people, and you don't really want to have that conversation with me. But I'm going to work hard every day, and I feel a lot better that we get to run the narrative because we're always on the defense. We don't have to be that. We're kind of on the offense now. And I feel like we're in a space to say this is what really happens in government. I'm talking to all y'all. We at the family reunion, we at the 4th of July, we at the Juneteenth, and we talk about what government is. We talk about what's going on in government. But that ain't really what happens. And so now we get to have this clarity. And social media, bless his little heart, it's a catch-22 because you can find really good information, but you also can get really good assholes who pull people's attention and give a false narrative account of what's going on. And so I think we're all struggling. We're all got some burnout, still from the election. I don't know about y'all, but I'm still a little burnt out. But I'm grateful that Chicago is the city it is and that we're taking care of each other despite what's going on in D.C. Like, I'm a little less worried. Now, if there was a Rom there or a Dady there, because they really Republicans. Say what you want to say. You can be called a Democrat, but you're a Republican. It's a lot of Republicans that play Democrat because they know we vote Democrat. We just go down the line and hit Democrat. Don't get me started. But I am at the place now where I take a little breath. I know what's going to happen because we've already said it. We've already tried to get the story about what he was going to do, and he's doing it. And so it's now we should have planned, and we should still be planning on how we take care of each other.
Alex, how have you seen this this learning process of going from being on the outside to having to be simultaneously inside and outside for labor unions, for socialist organizations like DSA, for social movement organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it is, challenging is like too simple a way to talk about it. It's a constantly evolving dynamic too. And I think that we still don't understand effectively what does coordination look like from outside in a large scale way. I do think, in a moment of real national crisis, in a moment of rising authoritarianism, gives us some opportunities and a necessity to figure that out in a way that doesn't have to be oppositional. So I think that right now, these last couple of months, while we should have been more prepared, and that goes very broadly for movement forces, for people in government. There are some real opportunities to figure out how to move forward together. And I think that this is going to be the constant tension and contradiction that we have to manage and deal with. And I think hopefully we've got to get used to managing that tension in a long-term way and figuring out how that leads to, again, growth and kind of structural growth and advancement too.
As the Chicago left is figuring out this inside-outside situation, your political enemies are finding themselves in the unusual situation of just playing the outside game. But they are definitely beginning to play that game hard. And so I want to ask, what does the organized opposition to Johnson and to the left in power more broadly look like? How are real estate, finance, the Democratic establishment, the charter school industry, Zionists, how are they all coming together to try to put an end to this really incredible left-wing political project in Chicago? What is the opposition coalition? What are they up to?
Using our playbook against us. So think about this. We put a law in to stop them from just closing public schools. So now state law says you got to do all of these things before you can close the school. The charter fucking schools used it so they could keep their charter contracts. I know. We got to push it in right there. Say this is just for public schools, not for charter schools. They're using the things that we did well, so they're organizing. Have y'all ever seen a city council meeting? I can't really see y'all to raise y'all hand, but have y'all seen the Universal Soul and Ringling Brothers Circus? They got a set of motherfuckers that come down there that look like me talking about go red. Go red where? Because not the fuck here. Not in this Democratic state, you not. And let me not get into the Democrat and the Republicans because they all done fucked us over. I work for government and I hate it. I really do. Because I feel like, and one of my mentors asked me when I first ran for office, like, what's your exit plan? I'm like, exit plan? What the fuck is he talking about? I ain't even know it yet. He said, justice is not going to come fast enough. You're going to have the answer. People are not going to always listen. And to see the fruits of your labor for what you've been fighting for and what you want to see, you might not get to see it. And that's hurtful. That's hard. And that's a reality. Like, Brandon got in office. We didn't even get to celebrate the win because DC changed on us. And some of that shit is our fault. Okay. Don't answer. Don't say nothing. But some of it is on us because we was organizing the wrong fucking people. We should have been organizing poor white people, Asian folks, and Latino folks. We was too busy organizing Latino folks and black folks who already decided we know what's on the fucking other side. We don't want it. And so let's have some ownership about that. See, we don't take ownership for shit we do wrong. And so for me, I am at a space where I'm concerned about if he doesn't make it who it is. Because they are pushing the narrative. Make no mistake about it. Harold Washington was killed by the stress of what he was being asked to do. Brandon might not die on us, but I'm sure his ass is stressed out because he's been asked to ignore the people who for decades have been ignored. And that's not what his administration is doing. And that's not what happened in the city hall, which is why they fighting so hard. But I want y'all to pay attention to what. And so one of the things that I said when I was knocking doors was, check my resume. Look at what I was doing before I wanted to be an elected official. I would spend 23 years on the local school council. I went on a hunger strike. Do it look like? If you look at my bag right now, I got some goodies in there because I'm eating all the time. So going on a hunger strike was less about Jeanette and more about what young black people needed to know that people in their community cared about them. Do not let the rhetoric make you feel like this man is not doing his job. I did it. We don't have, and right now I'm talking to black people, we got to have grace for each other. We don't give each other grace, and we need to. And so as much as he has gotten on my nerve, and it's only because I want him to wave the wand and fix it. I did too. And that's me and my honesty. That's me being as transparent, which you say transparent, you saying all the shit you want to say. But that's me just pouring my heart out to say, take a strong look before you decide, if he decides to run again, not voting that man back in office. Because he said everything that he was going to do, and for the most part, he stuck to it. See, sometimes I think we forget that politics and government are two fucking different things. And so what I say I'm going to do when I'm on the doors, I'm going to give you the world, rainbows and sunshine. When I get in office, I don't realize that there are 26 fucking people who might vote against the interest of what I'm trying to do. Or if I wanted to be veto proof, that's 34. And so us really figuring out how to look at this different, looking at the people we vote in, knowing that them fucking Congress people, think about this. They've been elected officials in Congress since before I was born, and I'm 50 fucking years old. Why the fuck are they still there? Why do y'all keep voting for their ass? Same thing for them crooked ass judges. Don't go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, that look black, that name look familiar. No. Think about this. That last election, who got some mailers from a judge? Raise your hand. Where y'all live at? Huh? No wonder. But we got nothing. They didn't even have, like, they usually have these conversations in the community where they bring you out to tell you what they doing. They did none of that on the South Side. It wasn't vote for a judge. See? Absolutely. So the fucking judges disrespect us and take advantage of our vote and we let them? Y'all keep electing these motherfuckers. And so it's us really thinking about what we want and really working too, because what we got to get past is each other. I'm on a panel with two people. If I walked out with the room out of the room with them right now and I had to get a fight, I know they fighting with me. Of course, I got my staff back there. They gonna kick ass, but these people gonna fight with me, and I'm comfortable with that. But I also am comfortable enough, or I want to be uncomfortable to have the conversation when we say that's not quite what's gonna work. That's not good for this community, might work for that community. Let's be able to teach, and we got to teach civics. But I'm gonna get on my soapbox because people pretend everybody who is fighting us at City Hall ain't got shit to do with us. The city didn't take your property, the court did. The county did. We didn't do it. And so we got to get back to teaching people about government.
Asha, who are this project's political enemies, and how are they organizing to destroy it?
Yeah, so I think just to connect this back to the last piece around how does our organizing in this current political terrain look different, right? Like, I think we come into this political moment after like so many years of using whoever was mayor as shorthand for describing everything about the system that was wrong. And it is really different when you now have one of your people in there. And sometimes it feels kind of the same, because if people are using that same playbook, you're pointing at, it's like, oh, well, he's the mayor now, he's on the hook for everything. And I think it's super, super important that we like peel back the curtain to say, yeah, we may have replaced who's in the mayor's office, but like, we haven't gotten rid of all of the moneyed interests and harmful industries that spend money to shape the way that things are for people in this city, for the most part, making it harder, more expensive for most of us in order for, you know, them to profit in whatever type of way. So like, we all know Rahm Emanuel's name, the man who closed schools, the man who closed public clinics, the man who covered up police murders. But like, who knows who Michael Sachs is, who like hasn't been in a workshop where I talked about it before in this room. There's not a lot of hands up. That's the billionaire who's like ideologically committed to the project of neoliberalism, aka stealing public resources for his and his friends and the industries he's accountable to's own private profit-driven gain, who comes out of the finance sector, who funded Rahm Emanuel's political career. And, you know, a Michael Sachs is still, even in a race, when you don't have a mayoral candidate backed by that coalition, you don't have a Rahm Emanuel in the race, is spending tons and tons of money, spending mailers, fear-mongering around Brandon Johnson said defund the police, 911 response times are going to go up, or Angela Clay or Byron Cicho Lopez, all of whom they spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on just those mailers with that message, all of whom won their elections, which I think is significant if we're thinking about what messages do and do not work and what our people are resilient to. So sorry, I was getting a little excited. Michael Sachs is like just one example of one of the billionaires that have for a long, long time spent money to shape our political system, to shape the candidates that are elected to office, that shape what their policy agendas are about, and that convene other people from other sectors that have an aligned set of interests around how they want our city, our state, and our country to function for their own profit and gain. And so if we think about that opposition coalition, and I think right now they are very aligned because it's much easier, as we have all experienced, to be aligned and in coalition when you are out of power than it is when you are in a little bit of power, or like feel like you have a little bit of power. Whew. But it's the real estate industry that spent money, to defeat our Bring Chicago Home proposal, that doesn't want affordable housing, that doesn't want rent control, that wants it to be too expensive to live so they can profit from that. Real estate industry players, the finance industry, the Democratic Party establishment types that are like ideologically committed to a status quo, and the media institutions that they are all tied up with, the charter school industry, and the Walmart funded entities that push that policy agenda, and then the kind of like new kids on the block in that political coalition locally are like the pro-Israel Zionist forces that we're starting to see spend money. And so some of what that looks like is who got a text message during the budget cycle, maybe about your alderperson, and then a negative text message about your alderperson and the mayor around property taxes. Okay, there's like some hands going up. I don't have to narrate.
They text you about yourself, Jeanette?
Yes.
I hadn't even thought about that.
So there are these. So the budget vote. There was this vote, that Alderwoman Taylor mentioned about the curfews. So they are literally, it is 2 years, and the time I'm talking about was 2.5 years before an election. They are sending mailers, they are sending text messages, everything newsworthy that's happening in city council, they are sending negative messages to every single city council person that is in the Progressive Caucus, to voters in all of their wards, fear-mongering, spreading misinformation, literally lying about what the thing, you talk about civic education, it's like civic miseducation of voters to just drive to drive misinformation, to drive down favorability, and every single one, it's like this progressive alder person and the mayor, they're making you less safe in this way. And people are being berated with this information every single time something moves through city council, with text messages, with mailers, with other types of ads. And that's not even to speak about how they're like tied up with and able to influence earned media in that type of way. So we are facing there's a $10 million, C4 entity that is reflective of these industries. I know that these people meet with each other on the regular, just like we should be doing. That is kind of like the coalition that we're seeing. And I just can't understate how active they are, how threatened they are, and how much energy they are putting into interpreting our political reality for the people of the city of Chicago, and how much more money and resources they have to do that than we do. And I think that, any real conversation about how we change this city, it can't just be looking at who's in elected office and how do we influence them, but it has to look at who are we in competition with to influence them, and who are we in competition with to interpret for the majority of people what is actually going on.
I want to add one anecdotal thing, and I think that the media question is really important. And this, during the Chicago Teachers Union's recent leadership election, the opposition to the core slate, their presidential candidate got a primetime interview on Fox 32 News in Chicago. I want people, I know there are going to be people listening to this from all over the country. I cannot remember a time I was a union officer for over a decade. I have paid as much attention to this as anybody in this country over the last 20 years. I have never seen a candidate for internal union office be interviewed on primetime network like local news. And so the alignment, and that is something that it kind of like passed by, it sails, but these things happen on a weekly basis here in Chicago, whether it is from the corporate media, whether it's from the other people who are kind of able to drive that message. So I think we should, just like we kind of talk about the media normalizing Trump, normalizing the far right, the media in Chicago has played a huge role in normalizing all of the opposition, even and to the point of like leading questions, because their presidential candidate was not able to really answer them. It was a really remarkable moment that I just wanted to point out.
And I just want to highlight one thing that Alderwoman Taylor said, in case it wasn't clear for people outside of Chicago, about what we're seeing in city council meetings. In the city of Chicago, the chambers of our city council meetings are full of Black Trump supporters. Like, they are...
Wait, really?
Yes. That's what she was talking about. I just had to underscore that for people who weren't
from the south suburbs
that.
of Chicago.
From the suburbs of Chicago, who are... And that is not to say that Black people in the city of Chicago are going for Trump. Sure, some people are. I've knocked on their doors. I've had those debates. My neighbor, who I love. For that person in particular, that voter profile is a person who is disaffected, who will talk shit with me in my kitchen about the Democratic Party. And I'm like, yeah, that's the whole thing. And I think we need better people at every level, not just at the aldermanic level, to be able to deliver like an alternative. But the like Black Trump supporters that we're seeing in city council, that's like not necessarily the profile I'm talking about there, but it is to say there are resources going into painting a picture of who the opposition to our leftist movement is, and who our movement does and doesn't represent. I think there is an enormous manipulation of elevating Black people in that way, but there's some really bizarre things going on in terms of what our opposition looks like and how they're trying to kind of play up certain dynamics. So I just didn't want that detail to get missed.
I'm Naomi Klein, and you're listening to The Dig, my go-to podcast for the most thoughtful, in-depth conversation on the left. It's an incredible place to be exposed to new ideas and new writing. And if you can, please become a sustaining supporter at Patreon.
This episode of The Dig is brought to you by our listeners who support us at patreon.com and by Pluto Press, which has loads of great left-wing titles, perfect for Dig listeners like you. One that you might like is Coercion, Surviving and Resisting Abortion Bans, by Jezebel reporter Kylie Chung. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, the horrors inflicted by abortion bans began immediately and haven't stopped. These laws have become a tool for abusers as pregnant people face legal harassment, reproductive coercion, and medical trauma. In Coercion, Kylie Chung argues that these aren't unintended consequences, but deliberate acts of state-perpetrated violence. Capitalism has always consciously decided whose lives are expendable. This book is for everyone coming to terms with this fact in the era of the rollback of our bodily autonomy. Dig listeners can get 50% off their first order of this or any book from Pluto Press using the code DIG50, DIG50 at plutobooks.com.
One case I'd like to explore in some depth is one that you just mentioned a few minutes back, which was the Bring Chicago Home ballot referendum, which was in March 2024. It would have helped house tens of thousands of homeless people in the city by dedicating a small transfer tax on property sales over $1 million. Real estate interests poured a ton of money into this fear-mongering campaign warning of rent hikes and stalled developments, and the referendum, sadly, was defeated. What lessons would you draw from that campaign, which was a really early and important defeat so soon after Johnson took office? And Asha, let's start with you, since you helped lead it. Why did it fail, and what were the consequences of that failure for the new administration and the larger project?
That was a really hard loss and a really hard campaign. And yeah, I led the field and organizing components of the Bring Chicago Home referendum, which it was a proposal come from community organizations and people with lived experience of homelessness to create a permanent revenue stream for affordable housing and wraparound services specifically for Chicago's homeless population. And the solution to create that revenue stream was to restructure what's called the real estate transfer tax. And so basically, anytime a property is sold, there is an existing tax, and this would have made that tax structure progressive. So it would have increased that tax for any property sold for over $1 million and decreased it for anyone else. So it's a little tiny tax cut for the regular home seller and a increase on commercial property sales and multi-million-dollar property sales. This was one of the first big consolidated efforts of that opposition coalition that I was talking about, really, really trying to prove their strength against us. Not only was the real estate industry, which, at the same time as we're running this campaign, it was being sued for price fixing, didn't want to have the wealthy few pay their fair share. That was our message. But it was seen by a broader set of actors as a way to kind of stick it to the progressive coalition to be you can't deliver on your things. And so there was a ton of misinformation. There were ads run making people think it would make their property taxes go up. This is a totally different tax. There was a lot of misinformation, particularly that kind of played up anti-migrant sentiment, saying that this was a new tax that was going to go towards, sheltering migrants and really like playing up kind of black-brown tensions and this idea that this was money that was not going to benefit long-term Chicagoans, which is also absolutely not what it was. So there was a multi-million-dollar media campaign, and I believe the real estate industry would have spent whatever they had to defeat our proposal, despite a really massive organizing push. This was 1 year after we knocked 500,000 doors and ran this beautiful, massive field program for Brandon Johnson. And somehow they convinced me to be like, it's a year later, we got to do it one more time. We knocked almost that many doors. We contacted more than 1 million people, via phone and text and all of that, and had a coalition of more than 100 organizations doing the organizing work. But the headwind of misinformation and media was just too strong. And I think to that point of like the strength of being out of power is like you have our opposition in that context had the strength of everyone's built up mistrust in government to deliver anything, mistrust to spend money how they say it will, and any historic promise that someone in the mayor's seat has made before and not delivered on to play up. And so it's like you're mad about migrants, you're mad about taxes, you're mad about history, and everyone who's ever been mayor of Chicago, vote no. That was basically what their ads said. And it worked. And I think I learned a lot about how I wish we had stronger media infrastructure that was more favorable to us. I will also say there are like some just self-critiques of how the campaign was run. Like we had polling that said people are with this proposal, and the ballot language was so clear that we spent a lot of our like media real estate, for lack of a less weird word to use in this context, explaining it to people. And our opposition took advantage that we were just trying to be like, we're right on the policy and we know people agree with us. And they then took up the space of tapping into how people were feeling in a way that I think we could have done better. And then the other thing I'll say is that they filed a bogus lawsuit, a legally flimsy lawsuit, and they kicked us off the ballot. And there were all these headlines, or they invalidated our ballot question for a couple of weeks and caught us up in this whole legal battle that like took weeks and weeks of staff time. I feel like I went to like law school for dummies over the weekend, literally like filing amici brief. Like I didn't know what that was, but I'm like on the phone trying to get in touch with the ACLU, like will you sign on to our thing? So yeah, they
and that confused voters.
It was very confusing. There were headlines making it seem like this wasn't on the ballot, and it was a distracting thing. So they really came at us with fancy lawyers and every kind of trick they could. Ultimately, our question was validated and back on the ballot and all of that, but we had to fight this whole battle in court.
Alex.
I want to say that it was a learning moment. And I do think that there is, 1 year after the election where Alderwoman Taylor and a lot of leftists and progressives were reelected after the mayor was elected, we had an opportunity to kind of count our forces in a challenging environment. And we saw where we were with Chicago voters. And that in and of itself has real value. I'll also say that, and I've said this in a lot of different rooms before. I'm going to say it out loud. I'm inspired, Jeanette. A lot of the policies that we expend a lot of energy trying to move, I was there. This was a policy that I think was first proposed in 2017, which was a very different moment. Rahm Emanuel was still the mayor. And the policy in and of itself is a good policy that is a progressive policy. But that kind of thing almost 10 years ago was like reaching toward the limits of our possibilities. And so when we are campaigning on something that doesn't take into account, and there's a lot of machinery that moves into it, I don't think there are lessons we can learn, but I don't want to just learn tactical lessons about how we run campaigns, what is the smarter media strategy, how do we have the right people. I do think we've got to learn the lesson of actually saying in the clearest language and creating policy proposals that are in the clearest language of what we want to accomplish. I also want to say that around that same time was when the city council passed $1 billion bond issuance that is largely going to development and is going to be in a position to create a gigantic amount of affordable housing, much more than the 100...
Green social housing.
Yeah, including green social housing. So I also, once we're in those positions where we don't have the power to just make things happen, but we can make a relative balance of what is there. I'm 45 years old, and I have been, doing this work for 25 years. I have lost way more than I have won over my lifetime. And so I want us to understand that there are steps forward and backward, but I don't want us to relearn these lessons of tactics and strategy when we have to be learning lessons of creating a vision that people can come to. And I think that's true in a lot of different ways. If there hadn't been such a sharp division created around migrants, in part created because of the mayor and leaders in city council's insistence that they would not go back on the commitment that was made to ensure that there was housing and services for every single person, a commitment that most large cities in the U.S. went back on, whether they said it out loud or whether they did it in quiet. There's a lot of different things that we could say would have changed the specific votes in this referendum. But I want to take the lesson of kind of vision and charting something forward that allows us to think again about the power we have and the power we need.
Alderwoman.
The question failed because we refused to listen to community saying put the sanctuary city question on the ballot. That's why it failed. Let's be honest. And we were on opposite sides of this because when you think of referendums, there is nothing legally there to hold you to that referendum question. But what I explained to the organizers was what we should have been doing at that same time when we were talking about the tax was talk about what it means to be a sanctuary city. We did not have that conversation, and Black Chicago felt ignored. Now, I'm one of these people, and I'm going to say it because who going to whoop my ass? Latino people ain't done shit to me. White supremacy has. That's who's fucking up my life. That's who's getting on my nerve. That's who making my insurance go up. That's who fucking me over. Not Latino people who we still don't remember that America done fucked over their countries. That's why they're here in the first place. See, we will have the sidebar conversations and pretend and want it to look all pretty. Nothing about none of this shit is pretty. And so it failed because a lot of folks in their racist state wanted that question to be on the ballot and it wasn't. So they said, fuck y'all question. That's what happened. Look at how if you look at the numbers, you look at how it was voted on in certain communities, the same people who said they wanted felt ignored. And so they did not. They ignored the question or said no. And so that's how we lost. And that's a lesson for us to learn to A, listen to each other, and B, making sure that we make sure that we're listening to Black Chicago, because too often we don't. We do not. And so, and while Black people, we got our own shit that we could talk about later on in the back, you still need us to vote for y'all. Y'all still need us to come out and be part of those conversations. I tell the people all the time, the Black Caucus has 20 votes in the city of Chicago. Say what the fuck you want to say about everybody else, but y'all got to come to us and have that conversation. And so this was the exact same thing. And while it hurt to have to tell people you in coalition, I told you so. I told y'all this was going to happen. I said this did we not have this conversation? And it hurt because I was trying to tell them what I was hearing and what people kept, and what we should have did was, even if we didn't decide to put the question on, we should have been talking about what it means to actually be a sanctuary city. Because I don't think people understand what it ultimately means. And so Black folks felt disrespected, and so they voted no to it.
Yeah, I want to get deeper into this and set a little context for the listeners at home, because the arrival of a huge number of migrants to Chicago, including many sent by far-right Texas Governor Greg Abbott, it posed a major challenge for the Left Project here and for the Johnson administration. It generated anxieties and anger among Black Chicagoans who felt that the new arrivals were being taken care of while their neighborhoods had been neglected for decades.
Absolutely.
His proposal to house migrants in a tent city anchored many people on the left, and people in all sorts of neighborhoods really rebelled against the opening of shelters in all of those neighborhoods. how did the politics of mass migration play out in Chicago? And in particular, to expand on what the Alderwoman was saying, how did it reflect or surface tensions between Black and Latino communities?
So I represent a ward where it's about 15% Latino, because I represent parts of Back of the Yard, and New City is Motown for, when they want to gentrify some shit, they change the name. So I have a percentage of Latino folks in my community where I door knock who actually vote for me. And so the problem with my community was we didn't have a say-so over the shelter. That's number one, because Lori Lightfoot. See, y'all keep blaming everything on Brandon. It was Brandon. No, the fuck it wasn't. Lori told the governor Abbott of Texas to kiss her ass. Does anybody remember that? And he kiss these migrants. Let me bust them up here, and he paid for it. And so he did not start this fight, but he had to finish it. Because I want to know, for y'all who call y'all self Christians and y'all love the Lord, and for a man you ain't never seen but you say you love, you would throw a man in the street. You would see a woman with a baby be sleeping her ass in a police station breastfeeding her baby. You would see people hungry and in the streets. That y'all Christians? Amen? Bullshit. You have never seen God. So the God you claim you love, you pray to, oh, Father God, but you mistreat people that's walking in and out of the streets every day, go to hell. Go straight to hell. I am not under no circumstances, and I said this in a statement that I made for on city council, to your point. I was conflicted. And I wasn't conflicted because I didn't want these people to be taken care of. I was conflicted because I know how hard I've been fighting to make sure that people in my community get their just due. The median income in my community is $25,000. They are now selling a home that's 2 homes, $964,000. Who the fuck is that for? Alderwoman Taylor, if you see me on the corner, just wave. It's because I'm trying to stay in my community that they're gentrifying. And so this whole rhetoric, and I'm going to say something that I heard an economist say. When we all stand together and realize who the real enemy is, the game is over. The game is over. Because if they can't say to me, Asha ain't good for you because her hair's straight and I got locks. No, Asha good for me because she got a good heart. She going to do what she's supposed to do. She going to fight with me and hold my hand. Latino folks ain't done shit but try to come to, and they ain't the only ones. And see, that's the biggest problem with all this. Latinos have been made the face of immigration. They are not the only people that have migrated or immigrated, and we imports, coming from an import, because you motherfuckers brought us here without asking. And I don't know if this is the place I really want to be. It just look cosmetically better, but it ain't no better. But it's because we've made Latinos the face of immigration, not realizing a lot of folks that they actually put in that shelter, they identify as Afro-Latino. They were folks from Africa. They were Haitians. They were not. I have a large population, a nice population of Nigerians and Ghanaians that live in my ward. And so we made a lot of mistakes in this. And this was one of the times where I wanted us to be transparent as possible. And we just didn't get to. Because for people to blame him for taking care of people that sit in the streets lets me know this ain't the land of the free or the fucking home for the brave.
Asha.
Yeah. Thank you, Alderwoman. Yeah, there are some of the moments you were talking about, we had these conversations, literally we had these conversations on the phone late at night. And that's my Alderwoman, and I get to talk to her on the phone late at night and have these conversations, and I think that's really beautiful, and I'm so happy to be represented by you. And I live in that community that you're talking about. I live 1 block from that first migrant, literally, my block, my neighbors, that was our community, where that first shelter was opened up, in a former school. And that did happen. That happened before Brandon was elected. Absolutely. Now, I do think that it escalated once he was in office, and it escalated. Republican Texas Governor Abbott absolutely escalated his political stunt of sending new arrivals to the city of Chicago, because we had elected a progressive mayor in an attempt to divide constituencies that had supported him and create a genuine political challenge. There is no acceptable way to receive tens of thousands of people coming with medical needs and injuries and in literal wet clothes as like the only things on their backs, having gone through who knows what to get into this country, being sent to a place that they don't know. There is like no adequate way to actually receive people who've been through that. Then nothing is enough. And, you know, if you're saying, hey, we're going to take responsibility for sheltering people, the companies that can staff like a refugee camp in a city in the Midwest are horrible companies that have only done horrible things before. And that's not to excuse the shittiness of all of it, but it is just to say that was intentional. And that was a political move that was made fucking with people's lives. And that was intentional. And, you know, so that meant that the mayor's very first city council meeting, at the very same time, there are, you know, you described police stations and airports, literally every police station driving through, you know, I don't know if it was every neighborhood, but as every neighborhood I drive through, you have people literally sleeping on the floor of and outside of every police station in the city of Chicago. Thousands of people getting off a bus every day, children, babies, sleeping in police stations. Who's ever slept in a police station? It's not a good situation. No one wants to be sleeping there. So it was very much a crisis, and very, you know, that's what's going on in his very first city council meeting. And one of the first big decisions that he made was to, I think, pass some like $52 million in emergency spending to shelter people because it was an emergency. And the opposition really played up this message to send a message to Black Chicagoans in particular that, like, hey, this coalition isn't actually for you. They're only concerned with this other set of people that, quote unquote, just got here. And, you know, that did play up real tensions for communities that have been disinvested in for years and for whom, you know, our movement was running on a promise for. And so that is a real structural tension that was like intentionally fanned the flames of. And just on in governance level, it meant that all our people that we sent inside went into government in a state of emergency. And like, just think about you in your life and how you like manage things in an emergency. Like if you, that set the tone for the administration. And I think that can't be understated in how much it shaped the like shape that people's leadership was in going inside. And I think that was just like a really effective thing that our opposition, you know, even beyond this state did, and then within our state took advantage of in terms of like the messaging that they were sending in really kind of horrible and exploitative ways.
Alex.
I don't have a ton to add. I do think that it's important to remember, I don't want to give the Biden administration a pass. There were thousands of Ukrainian refugees who were brought to the United States in an organized way, brought to the Chicago area, given resources. And I know that the mayor and everybody was going to the federal government for resources, not getting enough for what was happening. And so I just do want to make sure that it was a political act. It was the Governor Abbott and the far right, you know, using some of the, you know, people who'd really been through hell as human shields and political pawns. At the same time, I don't want to give the Democrats in power in the federal government a pass for not actually doing what they should have done, which is adequately fund cities' response.
I want to get into cops and crime, and then
quoting Dan, I want to get into cops and crime.
It's my new hobby. I can't decide which one, and then close up with one kind of question about looking forward and where things may be heading. The Chicago left in so many ways has built its power over the years through the struggle against police brutality, including, you know, famously for the whole country, the movement that exploded in the wake of the 2014 police murder of Laquan McDonald. Johnson, since taking office, has had conflict in all sorts of directions around questions of policing. There have been conflicts with some black alders over his opposition to the spot shotter gunshot identification system, and also over his recent, and I think, if I understand this correctly, extremely rare mayoral veto of an ordinance that would have allowed police to declare emergency youth curfews at locations of their choosing. Meanwhile, Johnson angered some on the left by signing a new contract with the police that included major raises without major reforms, even though, Asha, you note the city has also implemented, this is, I'm quoting from a recent piece of yours in these times, quote, a treatment not trauma program, which is now starting to send mental health professionals instead of armed police to respond to some mental health crises, and reopen 2 of the many free public mental health centers that previous administrations had closed down. At the same time, crime is way down, and yet it seems as though Johnson has been unable to capitalize on that politically. So there's a lot going on here. Asha, let's start with you. How would you assess this balancing act the mayor has confronted on crime and policing?
I spent a lot of the last 2 years thinking about this question. And yeah, a lot of my organizing life has been on public safety. How do we invest in public safety beyond policing? How do we think about what makes us safe beyond just like how we respond to instances of violence, but actually how do we make sure people have the things that they need so that those instances of violence and harm or whatever it is are fewer? And yeah, that was my issue. And that was the basis on which I was going to support Mayor Johnson in the first place and bring my community with him. We had just we had put a question on the ballot around whether people in the ward in the 20th ward, the ward I live in, that Alderwoman Taylor represents, we'd put a question on the ballot asking people if they wanted the city to invest in a non-police mental health crisis response. Would you rather have a mental health professional respond to mental health crises instead of cops? Do you want the city to invest in public mental health centers? We knocked on a ton of doors in this majority black ward. 90+% of people said yes. We did that because we wanted it to be a major issue in the mayoral race. We had just won that. And I think he had announced his mayoral run, like as we were in the midst of that door knocking. I hosted a house party with like all the people that had knocked those doors. We had Brandon Johnson in my living room. It was really, really packed, and I didn't have he ended up sitting in like a stool. It was like really awkward. And anyway, we're asking him questions about the police budget. And it was a room full of people that had spent their whole, of young people, of older people who had been a part of this black movement around policing. And we asked him what he would do about the police budget. We asked him to pledge, to make treatment not trauma, which was the name of the mental health proposal, a top issue in his campaign. And he said yes. And, from people who had spent every month in police board meetings with Lori Lightfoot snatching the microphone from people who were telling their stories of losing loved ones to police violence, to protesting Rahm Emanuel after emails getting leaked where he intentionally covered up the murder of a black teenager who'd been shot 16 times in the back, to have somebody who's like in my living room talking to us about defunding police and how we're going to build like a non-police mental health crisis response system. That was sort of the basis on which I got involved and backed Mayor Johnson. And there's people in this room who are in that room and who are a part of different fights. And so, on TNT, he has delivered, and not just Mayor Johnson. We've gotten 2.5 clinics reopened. There's a pilot of a non-police mental health crisis response system called CARE. We are fighting in this budget to see if we can make that citywide so that there is a clinic that serves people in every ward in the city of Chicago, a free, publicly run mental health clinic, and a non-police mental health crisis response system. 40% of 911 calls in the city of Chicago are for mental health crises. I don't think cops should be responding to those, and a lot of cops don't think they should be responding to them either. So, that is one really important issue on which we have seen movement, and we need to see more. Youth jobs, and in particular investment in a youth jobs summer program called the Peace Book, which was envisioned by the young people of Good Kids Mad Cities. We've seen investment in that. We need to see more. And then, yeah, I do think like I felt proud of our mayor with the curfew veto. It's the first time a mayor has used their veto power in 20 years, really saying it was the proposals for this snap curfew where the cops could say with 30 minutes notice there's a curfew, and then just like, I don't know, what does that empower them to do? They already have the power to like arrest young people for hanging out in big groups wherever, but it's empowering them to do that, and like in no way investing in anything that is like, if your concern is how young people are spending their time, like maybe invest in things for them to have other stuff to do. If you're concerned with violence, like maybe let's think about like, why are young people not okay? Like that is my question. If we're thinking about the problem of violence, right? Like what is the thing that leads to that in the first place? So yeah, I think that that's good. And yeah, I disagreed on the FOP contract, right? Like I wouldn't have given them a historic raise without like negotiating some reforms in the process and locked us into spending millions and millions more dollars on the police. You know, one proposal that's out there now is that, you know, I've supported is right now there's hundreds of millions of dollars that every year goes towards vacant police officer positions. Hundreds of millions of dollars. They have not increased the ranks of the police department despite having the largest budget for recruitment of any city department in 7 years. They cannot get people to be cops. That's not what people want to do. At the same time, Good Kids Mad Cities, who are running this incredible peer peacekeeping youth violence prevention program, they're turning hundreds of young people away because they only have, you know, funding for a pilot. So like, why are we giving the cops this slush fund for jobs they can't fill when young people are like knocking on the door of a community organization saying, we want to do violence prevention work? Like, let's invest in that. So that is one proposal that's on the table now that folks are organizing around and that we know we need to continue to push for more. And that's like another example of what it looks like to continue to push. And yeah, I think that the fear-mongering and the amount of money that has gone into like anti-defund messaging has gotten to people in our coalition. We've argued around it. And like, I just want to remind folks, they spent a lot of money on that in races that we still won. And I don't know, I've knocked on a lot of doors talking about this, and I believe that like this in particular is a very common sense solution. Like, let's invest in what works. Let's invest in what actually helps people have the things that they need to be all right, so that we're not having a conversation about how we respond to violence at all.
Thank you. Alderwoman.
Cities kind of tell you through their budgets what they believe and what they stand for. And I hate to say it, but over 40% of the city's budget goes to policing. And I don't know about any of y'all, but I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And if something is happening to me, my first thought is to not call 911. Especially if it's something to do with mental health, because literally my first month in office, they killed a young man whose family was calling to say he was having a mental breakdown and he blocked himself in the house. And their only response after being there, 10 or 15 minutes, was to go in and kill him. And the family was devastated, and I was, because I was like, oh my God, this is the first call. Even though I get plenty of calls about the policing. In this last 2 years, I struggle with the whole system of policing because I know what it does in my community. If I call the police and one of my white counterparts call the police, we know whose word they're gonna take. And so that makes it dangerous for people who look like me, and I'm an alderwoman. And so we gotta start with a conversation about what safety looks like in different communities, because it's different. What works in Woodlawn does not work in New City. What works in Washington Park doesn't work in back of the yards. And so we gotta start having those conversations about what safety looks like and what actually makes us safe. Nobody's ever said that. Think about this. I have a ward that's adjacent to the Obama Presidential Center. I don't have a Chuck E. Cheese. I don't got a bowling alley. I don't have a skating ring. I have nothing for young people to do. And so they run downtown because they have that. And let me say this. This curfew is not about safety. It's about protecting the interest of downtown and people who come to who are fucking visitors. Go visit somewhere else then if you worried about what young people are doing downtown. Don't come here. Bye. That tourism ain't really bringing us that motherfucking money anyway. So go. Bye. See you. This is about them protecting what they love. And it's beautiful downtown. And so let's call, because that shit is insured. You notice after the riots, ain't nobody crying. You ain't heard a peep, have you? Because the insurance checks then came. And they decided whether they want to make a little more money or they going to leave. And so let's talk about what this really is about. It ain't about keeping anybody safe. And let me say this. If you had those things that young people wanted in their community, because I hated downtown. And let me tell you why. My father was a man who would take, well, he wanted the sun. Let me just be honest. He wanted the sun. So my mother would have me and my sister dressed up in these little dresses, and he would take us downtown to get a muffin, and then took goddamn to see the Sox play or the Cubs, because he loved Andre Dawson. That was his thing. Literally, he did. And so downtown always made me uncomfortable, because I didn't see enough people that looked like me, and it was a reminder of what I didn't have. And so it was not a place where I wanted to be. And so, because the institutions in my community, so if you went down 43rd, 63rd, 79th, 55th, all those institutions served us, and we had loads of things to do in our own community. The park district were more welcoming. Just all around, you could be a young person jump roping. When the last time you seen a kid outside playing jump rope or hula hooping or doing scotch, writing on chalk and shit? You ain't. Because we've forgotten those lessons of what it's about to be a young person. I should be able to sit on my porch, do whatever it is I want to do, sing, do whatever, without being a target. And that's just not the type of system that we have. And so this thing around shot spotters, my problem with it was what we don't realize in that data, why it is the worst data ever, it didn't do what it was supposed to do. And so while people talking about you should have kept it, it did not do. My office is right. My old office was on 57th and Wentworth. We're right off the expressway. And so just imagine every time a truck backfires, here comes the police. Every time. My staff is here. There, no lies detected. And it's like you wasted all of this police money to come for a backfire on the expressway. And so it just didn't work. And so crime is down because we're investing in those young people and their families. Think about the tip worker, one fair wage. Like, we're investing in people, which is, nobody's ever done that. Especially not for people that look like me. Listen, I spent 30 years on the CHA wait list. They ain't gonna wait good, so I make good money to come talking about your numbers up. What the fuck? I've been waiting 30 years. And I know I've been waiting 30 years because my oldest baby is 35. I got a kid that's 30. Yeah, I was just about to say. And then when they called me, they wouldn't even give it to me because my 19-year-old had just graduated out of high school and he wasn't working. He was trying to figure out. And so they told me to make a decision. Either he doesn't come live with you or you don't get the house and you can go back on the list. I'm going to choose my child every fucking time because he mine. And regardless of what his daddy and whatever going on in his life, he belongs to me and he was made in love. And so we have a system that has historically done us wrong. But also we got to address the elephant in the room. If Pookie is robbing me, is Pookie going to help me? Another Pookie going to help them stop robbing me? And so you're made to think about policing in a different way. We used to keep each other safe in the black community. Because y'all do know it was a time where we would call the police and they didn't show up. They wouldn't come. Or they'll come after the shit was over. And that is still some of our reality. And so I think we got to have a real conversation about what policing is supposed to look like, war by war. And I'm going to be honest, I was in Ghana. The gate to the prison is this high. It's this high, which means I could climb over it. I know that's a sight to see, but because they don't believe in policing. They just don't. They believe in consequences, you paying what you owe, and you keep going. Think about this. We spend millions of dollars on lawsuits for people who have been falsely accused, then gave up 30, 40 years of their life for lying cops. So you expect me to believe in cops again after, a few years? No. And so, but I'm also in the reality of I have to work with the police. I have to call them. And I will say this, and I'll end with this. When I first got into office for the first 4th of Julys, I would always get a call that somebody got killed. And so every time somebody gets killed in your ward, you get a call from the police. No matter how it happened, no matter where it happened, you get a call. That has dwindled down. But that has dwindled down because you have communities who are now working and talking to the police, but also thinking about ways to hold each other accountable outside of calling the police. So seeing young people argue, I get right in and be like, I'll get a bill to whoop everybody ass out here. Go the fuck home and find something safe to do, and this ain't it. And I know we scared of these kids because we some punk ass parents, but that's a whole nother segment. We forgotten they could use an ass whooping. That's what I said. We should just go downtown with some belts and just start whooping ass. Everybody will go home, and ain't nobody dead, and everybody will be okay. They'll live to see another day tomorrow. I said it.
I want to hear that episode of The Dig.
Alex.
I don't have a lot. I mean, there is something that I kind of appreciate in a mayor's office that is not able to quote unquote capitalize on less children dying year to year. You know, there is something about we have increased youth jobs, we've increased these investments, we've made these small changes. It's not enough. Nobody says it's enough, but I do think, as you said, it is a balancing act that has to be engaged with in a clear way. And so I do think, like, from my perspective, where I sit, you know, thinking about, you know, people forget that we had the Democratic National Convention in the city of Chicago 4 months after 3 months or whatever, a year and a half. I don't know. I can't count. But a little over a year after Brandon came into office. And everybody said, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be a disaster. Now, did the police over-police some of those protests? Absolutely. Have they been doing that? Is some of the story that not nearly as much happened as would have happened under almost any other leadership? I think that's part of the story too. So part of it is the absence of things is much harder to talk about than the presence of things. And so I think we've just got to kind of keep that in mind. That's not to give anybody a pass on anything, but it's to say we've got to just look at the whole picture and understand what that balancing act is and understand how do we actually move that in a clearer way toward the goals that we have.
There was a disaster, but it was taking place inside.
The disaster was in Gaza, and it was inside the United Center.
Just one addition here, because a part of your question was about the mayor clashing with some like moderate and conservative Black, alder people, and that's not speaking to the few Black alders who are both in the Black caucus and the Progressive caucus, because it's not as much overlap as I would like to see. Is like, I think that's a growth edge in our coalition, is that we have elected a lot of progressives in white and Latino parts of the city to our city council, and we have like a smaller bench representing the South and West sides who come from movement, who are, progressive, and we have less organization, even in our ward, for example, or, other Black parts of the city. And, that's something that I'm deeply committed to building. And I think when we think about a broader progressive coalition, being able to say that we have elected Black leftists out of our movement, and that we have a really organized base in the communities hardest hit by whatever it is, and disinvestment is one way to put it. We've got to have a base in those places if we're going to be successful on our issues, or our coalitions are just too weak. So I do think that's like something important to be said, and there's a lot of that work being done by myself and others in this room.
Okay, to close out, and we are closing out. This is incredible. We've done like a full-length dig in person, and I don't think this has ever happened before, but I'm really grateful for all of your time, because this is such an important and very real conversation that we've had. A recent poll showed that Brandon Johnson, while only 26% of Chicago voters approve of his performance and 38% disapprove, 36% said their views were mixed. What can he build on? What can not just he, but the project build on to turn that into an electoral majority for his reelection in 2027? Recently, the mayor has been very outspoken, pushing back against the Trump administration's authoritarian agenda. And that, it seems, really has resonated broadly across the city. Is that something that he and the broader left project in the city can build upon to win back the majority coalition that put him into office in the first place?
Yes. That's my answer. No, I mean, I think it's there's a confluence, and I think Alderwoman Taylor said this really well early on in this conversation, and I'm going to just kind of paraphrase it and say it differently, but we're in a different position. We are 2 years in, things are being learned, and things are shifting in a different direction. Obviously, the threat, and not just the threat of Trump, but the reality of Trump, is something that we have to grapple with. And it is something, I remember saying to some friends of mine who were big critics of the mayor, who would you rather have being mayor right now on January 21st of 2025? Is there another mayor in the United States that you would rather have? They couldn't answer. They couldn't give me an answer to that question. So I think it's not a question of kind of taking advantage of that. It's an alignment of figuring out in a deeper way what needs to be done to move governance in the city, at the same time as being crystal clear about the dangers that we're facing and what the city needs to do, not just to protect our people, because there is a lot that the mayor and the city cannot do. We have already seen that. But what puts us in a position, again, to build power through this really difficult time with the Trump administration as that foil in D.C.
Alderwoman.
He could turn it around if we did a lot more collaboration, for me. There is an expectation that we would bring in people who normally never get to see the table. And while he's done some of that, I want to see more of that. And I want to see us agree to disagree as well. Like I've gotten to the place where I can disagree with something he's doing or saying, and I don't always got to call him on it. Like he know. My face say everything my mouth don't, and my mouth say a whole lot. But I also, as you all getting into government, it's not enough to get good people in politics. You got to get behind them. You got to. I think people do amazing work, and this is Alderwoman Taylor. This is what I've seen. People are around me. They're with me and my team. When we're running, knocking doors, trying to get in office, I get in and y'all just drop my ass. I don't have that anymore. And so sometimes I'm human. I'm conflicted. I'm a person. I think people forget I'm an everyday person with kids that get on my nerve. I got a grand turtle and a grand dog and some fish. I'm a nana. Like, I am a normal everyday person. While I can't go to my local Jewels, I still DoorDash and order my shit like everybody else. And so being able to have you all support and in our ears when we making that. And also, y'all, just because the left got that seat, y'all stop being in the other people's ass. Y'all have been silent on these motherfuckers who vote against y'all interests. Why? Because y'all think Brandon gonna be there forever? He not. He say 20 years, I give him 2 more terms. Hell, I know I'm leaving at the next term. Let me make that shit clear. I'm out. Because this is stressful. I listen, I have to wake up one morning and remind myself, you are somebody. You are every woman. I gotta talk to my star player. Because the amount of shit that they say that combats what I actually have going on is not true. Like, there's so much shit. I can't even have a normal relationship, y'all. Like, I can't be soft. Like, I have men that say to me, you a dictator. No, my father and mother was together, and my mother was the breadwinner, but you never knew in my house because what my daddy said went. Like, so this whole thing that I can't be soft, if you can't tell me what to do, you can't tell me what to do. But that also comes with, I'm paying the cost of standing up and saying what other people won't say. There are a lot of people who won't support me. There are a lot of people who drag me on social media. That's when y'all need to be like, no, that ain't how it go. That's not what she said. That's not what we're doing here. And so we need you all. We get into office. We can't do this without you. We need y'all as city council with us. And I told my community that when I ran. I'm taking you to City Hall with me. So it's not Alderwoman Taylor coming out of her ass making a decision. I'm on the phone. I got 2 rules. Good morning is after 10 o'clock. And unless you dead on fire, don't call me at 10 p.m. That's because people will talk me to death and talk all day long. But I need that. A, to humble me, because this job ain't fucking humble. There are spaces I could walk in and they will give me the world, and I didn't even ask for it. That's what elected officials go through. And I want y'all to hear this. You can, that conversation we have about passing envelopes, that shit happens. And we all got a price. I ain't special. My price comes with buying out my whole community. All 50,000 of us. And if you ain't gonna do that, get the fuck on. And you all have to know that you all are part of the process in this changing. Brandon didn't get here with just us and our small coalition. People had, and I tell people all the time, it does not matter how much money and mailing you sit out. If those people don't get off their ass and go to that voting booth and vote, none of that matters. And so we cannot make a country that we're proud of. When I go out of town now, they be like, you from America? I'm hesitating because people hate us so much because of what our government does. And so please understand that it is your silence is violence.
Asha.
Without getting into like field math, I saw a video of Bradlander saying this, repeating, I think, a quote that was from Greg Kassar initially, like the struggle within the Democratic Party right now is not between the center and the left, it's between fighters and folders. And I disagree. I do think that it is a fight between the center and the left.
That framework always bugs me a little bit.
Yeah. It's like a good line for Bradlander to say.
Sounds good.
Huh?
It sounds good.
It sounds good. It sounds good. But I think the second part is absolutely true. And I think it's a helpful reframe in what we're talking about. When we say center and left, it like is easy for the center to sound like, oh, we're the reasonable compromise people and not we're the people who are gonna, sell you out. And so, yeah, I really resonated with the second half of that framework. And I think Brandon Johnson and any political leader's success in this moment is going to be rooted in their clarity in how they're going to show up when so much of what so many of our communities rely on is at stake. And so I think that means fighting and being willing to speak out even when it means personal risk for political leaders. I think it means fighting in terms of figuring out how we're going to deliver, how we're going to create revenue, how we're going to protect the things that are at stake in real ways, to use the power, whatever power government has, to actually deliver, to take care of people. And then it means even when shit does get bad and people do feel, the impact of, this big billionaire bill, that we have political leaders who are on their side willing to stand up. And so I think Brandon Johnson and any political leader's success in this moment is going to be reliant on, showing people that they're willing to fight for them.
Well, Alex Hahn, Asha Ransby-Sporn, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, thank you all very much. And thank you all for coming tonight.
That was Alex Hahn, Asha Ransby-Sporn, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, live at the Lincoln Lodge. Alex Hahn is executive director of In These Times, a magazine dedicated to informing and analyzing movements of the left since 1976. He spent over 20 years as a labor, community, and political organizer. Asha Ransby-Sporn is a Chicago-based organizer and writer and a columnist for In These Times. She was a co-founder of Black Youth Project 100, where she led the group's national organizing program and worked on racial, economic, and gender justice issues across the U.S., and has since led on a number of winning issue-based and political campaigns. Jeanette Taylor is Alderwoman for Chicago's 20th Ward, a longtime neighborhood and education organizer on the city's South Side, and a member of Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you for listening to The Dig from Jacobin Magazine. As Marx once said, after noting that proletarian revolutions constantly criticize themselves, constantly interrupt themselves in their own course, return to the apparently accomplished in order to begin anew, they deride with cruel thoroughness the half-measures, weaknesses, and paltriness of their first attempts, seem to throw down their opponents, only so the latter may draw new strength from the earth and rise before them again more gigantic than ever, recoil constantly from the indefinite colossalness of their own goals, until a situation is created which makes all turning back impossible. While other podcasts have only interpreted the world in various ways, our point is to change it. We're posting new episodes most weeks, less often in the summer. The Dig was produced by Alex Lewis. Our associate producer is Jackson Roach. Music by Jeffrey Brodsky. Our operations manager is Sylvia Atwood. Our senior advisors are Theoria Francos and Ben Mabey. Check out our vast archives and newsletters at thedigradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram at The Dig Radio, and please find us wherever you get podcasts and subscribe to this one. If it's on iTunes or Spotify or wherever, please rate and review us positively. Those reviews help introduce us to new listeners, but what really and truly does that is you just telling other people to please check out the pod. The pod is good. You will like it, maybe. Please make propaganda for us. And do find us at patreon.com and make a monthly or annual contribution to keep this operation up and running strong. Even a few bucks is huge.